Today is September 28th, 2007. We're going to be interviewing Paul Bennett at his home on his birthday. He was born on September 28th, 1914. I'm Susan Leonard, and Paul is my uncle.
Well, I started out as a second lieutenant, commissioned from the ROTC at Rose Polytechnic Institute. And my first service was actually at Rose Polytechnic. Even before the war started, this was in 1940. They were taking the regular Army people pretty much out of the ROTCs in the colleges and replacing them with reserves. Since I was in the reserve, I got a letter from the Rose, wanted to know if I might be taking over as assistant PMST, Professor of Military Science and Tactics at Rose. Well, I was in a kind of a dead-end job at the moment, so I said, well, I might as well get started. This war is going to start, and this is a good place for me to get some training. And so I took the job, and I was there for over 2 years, a little over. But then, of course, the war had started in 1942, 43, and so I felt it was my duty to go with the troops, and so I asked for a transfer. And at that time, I was a captain. I had been promoted from a second lieutenant to first lieutenant and then to a captain. So I went with troops as a captain. I was first assigned to a unit in Florida, Camp Stark, they called it. But when I got down there, they found out they had too many people, so they transferred me to Camp Rucker, Alabama, where there was an engineering outfit just beginning basic training for a bunch of draftees and so forth. And they had already organized, and but I was assigned as a company commander at that time, and we went through the training up into unit training. This was a general service regiment, which was a kind of an old-time outfit. So, while I was in that training there, they changed that to a group, an engineer group, 11/19th. So they broke up that general service regiment into battalions, and I was transferred from being a company commander to the staff of that 11/19th as an S3, which is the plans and training officer. So we finished our training there at Camp Rucker, and then we're sent to Fort Pierce, Florida, where we trained with the Navy. You could see the handwriting on the wall, pretty much what was going to happen. We were training for invasions with the Navy. So we went through our training there. went up to Camp Pickett, Virginia, which is a place where they sort of broke you down and took all your equipment away and made ready to send you overseas. So from Camp Pickett there in Virginia, we got rid of our equipment, got on a train, went to Boston, got on a ship, went overseas. We landed in Cardiff, Wales, and we're taken from there to Pontardalis, Wales, which is close to Swansea. And they were about 2/3 of the way through building a camp there for us. So we got off in the mud there and saw a lot of mud from there on. But anyway, we trained there at Camp Minth was the name of the camp, which we called Mini Mud. And by that time I was a battalion commander and commanding a battalion that consisted of about 650 men, 4 companies, and some 130 vehicles. So we were really a combat battalion, but we had the word amphibious behind us, behind that. So we trained along the coast there of the Bristol Channel through the winter months there, and anybody's been in that part of the country in the winter know that's a miserable place to train. It rains all the time, not heavy, but always raining. And so it was a kind of a rough time. We were intense, of course, and food wasn't all that great. We were going to see worse, but Britain, people were on very strong rations, tight rations, I should say. And I guess they didn't want us to look too fat, so they kept us on pretty tight rations too. But anyway, we...
Before you go on, didn't you have a guy...
Beg pardon?
Didn't you have a guy, Bobby, that would come...
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting thing. There was a Bobby that came from one of the villages close to us, Pontardalis, actually. And he'd show up every day at noon for lunchtime. And he'd have some kind of complaint. Maybe one of our trucks had knocked some bricks off a building or something, those tight corners. Or somebody might have urinated in somebody's front stoop. The doors all came right out to the sidewalk, of course. And some of the guys probably did it. Anyway, he'd have a complaint every day. So we'd have to invite him to lunch. And that took care of all the problem. He'd open his waistcoat and take off his bobby hat and sit down and get his meal. So we stayed out of trouble pretty much that way. But interesting sidelight. Well, we continued our training there through the winter. And by that time, we were pretty well advised, or I was. I shouldn't say that was not. My troops didn't know much about it, but no, I knew where we were going for the later invasion of France. We made some of our plans and got ready to move out. So we moved into the southern part of England. Well, actually, we're broken up into two parts. But my headquarters went on down to Truro. And by that time, we were all under very tight security, and of course. And after we got settled there, we were able to tell everyone where we were going. And so we sat there for a few days. I was assigned to a bunch of other people besides my own battalion. People like, additional medical troops, military police, some of the service outfits. So I had to kind of look over them, went out for them. And one good piece of news, the general who was in charge of us said, "You guys ought to go in with the rank you're supposed to have when you're," and so he promoted me to lieutenant colonel at that time. And then we got our orders to embark. There were all kinds of vessels. We were actually myself was supposed to go into Cardiff and got on an LST with part of the troops. They were divided up into several landing craft. An LST is a landing craft tank, landing ship, I should say. It makes an LST. About 400 feet long, flat bottom, with a big bow door that let down, let you walk off it, so to speak, drive off it. So we loaded up, went out into the channel. And anyone knows the English Channel is pretty rough. And a flat-bottomed boat doesn't ride very well. So I was about half sick most of the time. Anyway, we went on. We knew where we were going. We didn't know the exact time yet, but as you may have read in history, the invasion was put off one day, and because of that bad weather they were having out on the coast. But anyway, they decided that June 6th was the day, and off. So we were just kind of idling out there, and so things got moving. I did not land on D-Day. I landed on D-Day +1, about half my unit got in on D-Day. But I was looking after all those other troops, so to speak. I had to get the barrage balloon guys in. If you don't know what a barrage balloon is, it's a balloon that was all over England. It's kind of a little small blimp, but one man could handle it. And those guys were a pain. They didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know where to go. Didn't know. Well, anyway, we finally got them on the LST, and just a little sidelight there. Well, D-Day went on. Troops started going ashore. That was quite a sight. There'll never be one like it, I'm sure. There's ships everywhere, all sizes, from a little minesweeper to battleship. Texas was assigned to Omaha Beach, was our beach. There were three beaches actually. Utah, which was on the right flank. The British were on the left flank, and the American troops were in the center. Well, my particular beach was supposed to be F Beach, Fox Red. We made it. That first night, I'll never forget, on D-Day. Fireworks you've seen will never compare to anything like that. Everybody was shooting and everything. So everybody was half seasick. Some of them landed in small boats, some in mid-sized boats. An LST could not land, so we had to transfer to a smaller boat. So all finally landed the next morning. Well, it was chaos, of course. And but one of my units had got in early, A Company, and built or opened up the first road off the beach, which meant clearing all the mines and grading it. All we had to do it with was a bulldozer, but we got the job done. It was open by 11 o'clock on the night of D-Day. That was one of our missions. And then our general mission was to get everybody across the beach, stay there, get the equipment across the beach, get things organized on the beach. And from there on, we did that. A lot of casualties, of course, on the beach. Our unit was very fortunate, had very few casualties. But our work from then on was just slugging work. Get people across the beach, get equipment across the beach, get supplies across the beach. They were supposed to open up Cherbourg Harbor, which was supposed to be the main supply route. But the infantry was slow to get to Cherbourg. Supplies were still streaming across the beach as fast as we could move them. Then, about 2 weeks later, a little more, about June 20th, a big storm came up there in the channel again. Wiped out about everything that was out there. It became a very critical time because we couldn't unload anything. And supplies were getting low. Things got really tough. General Eisenhower in his book said that was a critical point in the invasion. It might have failed at that point. But fortunately, it cleared up. We were able to get supplies moving again. The infantry finally got Cherbourg, but Cherbourg wouldn't open because they'd sunk so many ships out in the harbor. They couldn't get our supply ships in. So stuff still came across the beach. Well, they built a breakwater out on the beach, sank a bunch of old British ships out there. We got ourselves a part of a harbor. The Seabees from the Navy came in, built a little wharf out there. Well, we kept on getting supplies out, came across the beach. We got a bunch of prisoners of war as labor. Tried to use ducks, of course, which is an amphibious vehicle, like a truck. That didn't work. So we got a bunch of barges, a few tugs, unload the ships out on these barges and then unload them out onto the beach and take them back to the dumps, as we call them. All the time we were clearing minefields, had to clear fields for these dumps. Most of our casualties came from clearing mines. Well, finally, everything kind of settled down to just plain work. And then it started raining, of course. Roads went to pieces. So much shrapnel on the roads. Shrapnel is the pieces that come off shells or bombs. They're real sharp. They fall to the ground. Tore up the tires on our trucks. Believe it or not, we could not find any tire patching. So that became a critical item. I don't know why they must have finally airlifted it in. I don't know why they finally got tire patching. But a tiny thing like a tire patch became critical. Well, lots of problems. But we stayed on that beach much longer than we were supposed to. In fact, we were there for almost December. Then they finally got a harbor in Belgium, and Le Havre in France when they opened. Oh, we were out of work there, fortunately. Stayed around, cleaned up some. Then we got orders to go up to leave that and take on our regular mission as combat engineers. We were supposed to go up into Belgium. And about that time, they had what they call the bulge. The Germans attacked about the middle of the lines and made big headway and put quite a bulge in the lines. That's why they call it the bulge. So we were about to get to Belgium and got orders to go back to Paris. There were 4 battalions of engineers. Were supposed to protect Paris from if the Germans really broke through. Well, that was kind of silly, but we were prepared to protect Paris. Our battalion on the southeast sector. And we stayed there till, well, after the first of the year. A combat battalion is well armed. It's supposed to be able to protect itself. Say you put in a bridge and the troops go across the river and so on. The engineer's supposed to be able to protect the bridge from any attack or people getting around them or somehow. So we had plenty of weapons, but we were not. We couldn't have held off a tank if it was. Yeah. So anyhow, it was kind of silly, but that's where the. Well, then we were sent up into. They got that bulge. Not the bulge wasn't pushed back, but at least the line stabilized. So we were sent up into Holland, near Aachen, Germany, do some engineer work. And then we were sent a little farther up. We were right next to the British, really. And we were supposed to take care of some infantry, take over from some infantry units that were on the line up there. It was a quiet sector, so to speak, while these infantry people went down to try to push that bulge back out. So we were put on the line as infantry. Well, that was going to be interesting for a little while. It was real quiet, but not quiet, but there's not much danger. But we used a lot of ammunition. We never could quite figure out why people were shooting all the time. They didn't know what they were shooting at. But anyway, that was a cold, beginning to get real cold about that time. One of our primary missions was to stay warm, and that's hard to do. Engineers can take care of themselves pretty well, but we couldn't put up any shelters or anything, sleeping wherever we could find a schoolhouse or something like that, sleep on the floor, no heat. So the cold began to be one of our biggest problems. We couldn't keep warm. Hard to work, road work or anything else. So I would say that cold was real miserable. Well, things got kind of straightened out after the bulge was pushed back. Lines started moving again. Came to the Rhine River. Had to cross the Rhine. Our outfit was not actually in charge of the crossing, but we aided the unit that built a bridge across that. That was sort of like the invasion again, because that was a hard-fought battle to get across the Rhine. They had done it down in the south part by finding a bridge that was not destroyed, and they got a few people across. But they crossed the Rhine here by using the Air Force paratroopers to make a bridgehead across. So we got across the Rhine, followed units heading across the flat country of northern Germany through the winter there, and had some interesting road bridge work to do. And things were getting to get a little bit warmer. So might be kind of interesting sometimes. One time we were following a armored division. Well, an armored division, they don't really take country. They just go through it. And if you're following them, the enemy is still back behind them. We ran into some of that, had a casualty or two, but we kept going slowly. We spent quite a bit of time just cleaning up and repairing bridges and so forth like that. Needed just work that needed to be done. And then we began to run into some of the camps, the death camps, all over Germany. I did not visit any of them. I had no desire to see them. But I did get into a mess with a group of these so-called work units that the Germans used in their factories. There were prisoners from Eastern Germany and Poland, places like that. And these people were on a train going somewhere. And they ran into the American forces. So they just stopped the train and took these 1,000 or so prisoners into a big old potato barn, which was full of straw. It was a permanent building. It had stone walls and roof. Put them in there, set fire to the straw, closed all the doors. Anybody that tried to crawl out under the door, they had machine guns or kill them. They were all either suffocated or burned to death. Got into that mess. Ours was not the first unit there, but one of the first. I saw it. Worst thing I ever looked at, I guess. we were still smoking and carrying on. But pretty brutal, some of that stuff. The death camps were, of course, terrible. But at least the Americans were able to give them aid, and some of the people, although the pictures I saw, they didn't look like they could live, but some of them I guess did. We kept on going, moving along slowly. But you could see in general that down in the south, we were way up north, but down south they had actually made contact with the Russians at a few points. And then, well, in May or April, we got word that we were supposed to go up and get it ready to cross the Elbe River. We were not supposed to cross the Elbe River because at one of the meetings that Roosevelt, and Churchill, and Stalin had been to, they decided that the Elbe River would be the dividing line between East and West Germany when the war was over. And we were not supposed to go across the Elbe River. But General Montgomery, who was the head of the British Army, decided that he had better take the chance to go across the Elbe River and go up to the Baltic to shut off the retreat of the Germans from the Russians and prevent them from going up into Denmark and so on. Well, apparently he persuaded someone. I guess he didn't have the force to do it. So he wanted the armor division and so on. And so the 18th Airborne Corps got that job of getting across that strip of land, getting across the Elbe River. Well, we were attached to the 18th Airborne Corps to do the actual crossing of build the bridge across the Elbe. So that took a little preparing for. But I had to go see that place, or try to. The British were close to the Elbe. In fact, at that point, they were up had an observation post from which you could see across the Elbe and where might be a good place for a bridge. Well, it turned out it was. I was there with my operations officer and driver. We went in there and talked to the British. Yeah, we can take you out there. Well, they took us out there, all right. We saw what we needed to see, starting back, and we got into quite we were apparently visible to the Germans from across the Elbe. They started with some artillery. My S3, who was with us, he and I got in the holes, and I couldn't figure out where the driver was. He was a kid from Pennsylvania. Nothing bothered him much. We finally climbed out of the hole and said, "Where are you?" Well, I went behind that tree over there. I didn't worry much. But anyway, I never forgot that. Don't know why, but how you can get kind of casual after a while, I guess. But anyway, we prepared for the crossing. The airborne, 801st, I believe it was, airborne was supposed to go across first, but they didn't go by air. They went across in assault boats. So we were prepared for the bridge crossing. We had our equipment up there. And I said we were under fire that night and actually had one casualty. But the next morning we went to work on the bridge. Not a thing in the way. Perfect situation. The road was in. It had apparently been used for a ferry sometime in the past. So it was just an ideal place to put a floating bridge. So we had, the crew was ready, men were ready, went to work. We set a record for the fastest crossing of a bridge of that size that had happened so far. But it was just one of those things that worked out. There was not a shot fired during that period. And things started to begin to look up. We did have to build 2 booms across the Elbe. A boom is a floating device. It's just a cable with a bunch of logs on it or drums or something that keeps it afloat. Because the Germans had a habit of dropping mines in the water and letting them float down to the bridge, hit the bridge and blow it up. So, but anyway, we got that done. Everything was done. General Montgomery himself was there, and the head of the 18th Airborne Corps was there. Well, I got a medal for it, but anyway. Anyway, that was it. We crossed that. Everybody got across. Not a shot was fired, but it was, you know that, what was it, May 5th, then war was declared over. Well, we were across the bridge. I went on up to see the Baltic, and took a lot of prisoners. Didn't want them. We didn't take them. They just came. They wanted to get across from the Russians. No, we told them you can't cross the bridge. It wasn't me. It was somebody else's job. But it was great to have the war over. But we getting a little rest period over there. Well, then we got word. In the meantime, I had seen some Russians. They were strange-looking people, mostly Mongolians. But I wouldn't want to fight against them. So we were told we'd have to get out of there, get back across the bridge. So we did. And then we were sent way down to Bitburg, Germany. The French were supposed to have that area, and we were told to go down there and get all the engineer supplies and so forth. Bridges, Bailey bridges are called, temporary bridges up. And not to let the French have any more equipment that we could use perhaps somewhere else. But the rumor had come out, I don't know, I never heard any more than that, that our unit would probably be sent to Far East to make the invasion of Japan, since we had experience with invasion of France. I never heard anything more than that, but about that time they started dropping the bombs on Japan, the atomic bombs, and the war looked like it was over there. So I decided, well, it's time to go home. So I had you got to go home by the point system. You had so many points for time and, for medals, you got extra points and stuff. So I had some pretty good points. So I was supposed to go home and on the what they call the Green Line, which was an air operation. They'd fly you back to the States. Well, I got all the way down to Marseille, France. Then they shut that air thing off because they wanted all the airplanes to go to the Far East to get the prisoners and so forth back from the Japanese. Anyway, I didn't get to fly back, but we did get to take a ship back. So got back to the United States. Got back to Camp Atterbury, Indiana. Got to see Iowa again.
Was there a welcome for you when you got home? Or?
No, not that I remember any welcome other than my family and so on. But I stayed in the reserve after the war and never got called up again. I kept up my camps and so forth in the summer and stuff like that. Was promoted to a full colonel and finally retired when I was 60.